Welcome to Fatherhood for the Rest of Us with Brandon Handley. Because you're already great at everything else, why not fatherhood too?
Hey there, Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. This is Brandon Handley here, the voice of a generation, the creator, the founder of Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. I am excited to have you here with us today. Today we're going to be talking to JimAkers, who is the author of Tape Breakers. But Jim, man, he's got so much wisdom to impart. We definitely talk quite a bit about his book, the different stages of fatherhood. We talk about the transition from children to adulthood, and really just kind of the impact that has on a father who really just loves parenting as much as Jim does. We talk about how we view our own fathers, what's our relationship with our father, view the relationship that we have with our parents. We jump all over the place, but it's really just a wealth of knowledge tucked into this one. We talk about and Jim's really big thing about tape breakers. Who do you want to be remembered by, and what do you want to be remembered for? Just two huge questions you want to ask yourself as you're kind of going through life. We talk about trappings of success. Talk about how even later in life, he mentions, we've got a quote from a gentleman that he speaks who is older, and talking about trying to spend some time with their children who are adults now. And his comment and quote was, "Now that I have time, they don't." Really just, man, it hits the heart, guys. Really hits the heart. Talk about words of encouragement, elements of inspiration. I could go on and on and on. Needless to say, and the one thing, guys, please do make sure that you listen to the end as well. We're going to cover just something that's really near and dear to Jim and his wife, and a huge cause as they support, and kind of the impact of pornography on men and the society as a whole, and human trafficking. I know that's may not sound like the most inspirational tip there, but something that we can be aware of and not turn our eyes away from. So listen all the way through to the end. I promise you that this one it's worth your time. I might even recommend that you don't play this on high speed, because I don't want you to miss anything. So guys, please also reach out to Jim. Let him know that you heard him here on Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. I love the guests on the show. I really so grateful to be able to have these conversations. The impact that they have on my own life is huge, and I believe that releasing them out into the wild with you truly has an impact. Otherwise, I don't think I would do it. With that being said, guys, as always, if you enjoy this experience, if you enjoy Fatherhood for the Rest of Us, head on over to iTunes, leave a rating, a review, subscribe. That helps others to share this experience with you as we go through fatherhood and move the needle towards, just more and more exceptional fathers out there. Also, if you are not already part of the growing Fatherhood for the Rest of Us Facebook group, it is growing by leaps and bounds. We have some great men in there who are really just speaking out for themselves, seeking advice, giving advice, and being there for each other. I can't recommend it enough. If you're looking for a place and it's private, if you're looking for a place that you can feel comfortable, like you won't be judged for what it is that you're saying or going through. If you're looking for a place where, like, hey man, I wonder if anybody else is feeling this way. Guess what? We are. We all have our share of struggles. We all have our story of how we get through them. And chances are what you're going through, one of us has already gone through, or what you're going through and how you get through it could be an inspiration to the rest of us in that group. Fatherhood is not something that, and this is something else that actually is caught in this podcast, it's not something that we should do alone. So with all that being said, I highly encourage you, of course, to hop on in there. All fathers, please just reach out to me. You can reach out to me at I'm at Brandon G. Handley on Facebook. That's probably the best place to get a hold of me. Of course, we are on Instagram. I say we, all of me is on Instagram as well as on Twitter. So you can reach out to me in any of those various forms, but Facebook's probably going to be the quickest. If social media is not where you like to play, it's not your playground, I get it. I get that. Reach out to me, Brandon at Fatherhood for the Rest of Us, and let's have a chat. If you are looking for an accountability partner, if you're looking for anybody else to just try and help you get through this fatherhood thing, maybe I can be of service. I've certainly got some tools that I would recommend. As Devin Bannison recommends, these are tools, not rules, to help you through fatherhood. Let's have a chat. You can always schedule some time with me if you'd like over at reconstruct.brandonhanley.com. Looking forward to hearing your feedback on this one, guys. I think this one's gonna do it for you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, JimAkers is on here today with us, Fatherhood for the Rest of Us crew, and he is the author of a recent Amazon bestseller, Tape Breakers. Jim, I want to just say thanks again for taking the time to pop on here with me. And could you just give me a little bit of what's going on great in your life today? What kind of awesome things are happening?
Oh, thanks, Brandon. I think there's two things right now. My oldest son just turned 28. So this journey of fatherhood has taken me that far. And we were talking earlier, I'm also experiencing the reverse of that, caring for elderly parents. My mom's 79 years old, 100 miles an hour, walked 6 miles a day, broke her hip. And in that process, working and supporting her. So those are, two milestones at two different ends of life, right? The end of
Right.
life and the beginning. So those are the two big things right now.
Very interesting. It's got to be kind of interesting just to be in the middle like that, though, right? Kind of seeing not towards the end, but just being in the middle, right?
Absolutely. I think that there's a sense of, especially in fatherhood, you go through certain stages of it, right? And I wake up now and find myself at 58 years old, sometimes pinching myself and saying, did I miss a chapter someplace along this path? How did I end up with adult kids, and how am I reversing this that I'm thinking about caring for an elderly parent? Did I miss something? Because it goes by just so fast.
It's so true, and I'm sure you recall when you first had your kids, everybody told you that, right? And did you
Indeed, they
believe?
did.
Did you believe them? What was your reaction when everybody's like, "It's going to go by so fast"?
Wasn't that question? What are you talking about? The first few years, and diapers and all that stuff. Can't they hurry up and throw a baseball? When are we going to get to the fun stuff, right?
Right,
And
right,
then all of a sudden the fun stuff's gone, and you find they've moved out. And I think that's a tough chapter. If you've enjoyed parenthood like I have,
right.
Brandon, that's a really tough transition.
I hear that. I hear that. I enjoy it all. I enjoy it all. For me, I kind of missed the initial uh, couple months, first years, like when they would just sleep and they couldn't move and they couldn't talk back and all that stuff. Those were my favorite. Those are actually my favorite parts of fatherhood. The rest, when they start doing stuff, it's cool, but it does go by so fast. So I want to jump into your book. Just jump right into it. Like I said, I got fairly through it, and I really enjoyed it. But I mean, just immediately, Jim. I mean, I started reading the chapter on your dad. You start this book off like that. I don't know why, man. I was all teary eyed and bleary eyed, and there was like nothing too sad in there. But let's talk a little bit why you start your book off with talking about your dad.
Well, I think the major point in that experience with that chapter talks about his passing away was that I was really ambitious as a kid, definitely a type A. If there was a test, I wanted to get an A. If there was a competition, I wanted to win it. My dad was a guy that he didn't talk, he just walked. There was just something about him. And in a lot of cases, I viewed him at times as not being that successful. Why wasn't he more assertive in terms of things that he was doing career wise? And he could have done more. And then Brandon, after he passed away, I was going to speak at his funeral, and my mom said, "Hey, you might want to know a couple things about your dad." And she said, "There's a couple shoe boxes in the closet. You might want to go pull those things out."
Right.
And goodness, I start going through this and I look at his background and the things that happened to him. He lost 2 siblings and his mom had a nervous breakdown and his dad checked out on the family. And I'm thinking, goodness gracious, this guy was a great dad. He
Right.
was there for us. He could have ran. I mean, I would have been scared to death if I was him, right?
Right.
He had
Yeah.
no models of great fatherhood. He just was learning it along the way, and he was there all the time. So it just totally changed my perspective of what impact was and what success was. And now, I can't talk to him about those things, and maybe I didn't appreciate him as much as I should have, but I certainly got a dose of what it meant to be in the game every day, doing the work, showing up, loving your kids, loving your wife, and doing it consistently, even though you didn't have a model to learn from.
Well, yeah, I mean, I read it and like, I mean, it sounded like he had a pretty rough history, right? You had a stepsister, his wife, his wife passed, his first wife passed. And I mean, and then he came through it and he's still kind of like your role model. And then in the end there, you wrote about this, you wrote about going through and reading everything. And then, it wasn't just that like, whether or not he was like materially successful, it was like everywhere that came out had these great things to say about
Yeah.
him.
Well,
Right.
you got the essence of it. I remember standing in that church and it was standing room only. I mean, there was people hanging out the doors. I'm going, goodness, where did all these people come from?
Right.
And people that walked up and said, your dad always had a couple bucks in his pocket, for example. And we
Right.
didn't have a lot of money. I mean, my
Right.
dad was a career military guy, and NCO, non-commissioned officers generally don't make it a career. It's 4, 8 years and out. My dad spent 21 years doing that.
Right.
But he always had a couple bucks in his pocket. If somebody asked for it, he gave it to him.
Right. Right. And I mean, and that's, kind of came out of Appalachian coal mining things, probably the best thing he could do for himself. So that's, I mean, I think it's pretty awesome. And, definitely a great story. And you know what, before we even get running, man, and I know I just jumped right into the book, why don't we just talk a little bit about Tape Breakers and what the book is about, like what people should be taken away from it, or why present this book to our group.
Well, I think the biggest thing is not anyone wakes up in the morning and says, "Boy, I sure hope I wish to be a failure," or "I hope to be mediocre."
Right.
We always want to be great at something, and so the book centers on helping people identify, starting with a couple of questions I think are powerful. Who do you want to be remembered by? What do you want to be remembered for?
Right.
And when we get our roles right and we get them in the right priority, I think things start to click. I've seen a lot of examples of that in my own life and as I interview folks and I coach folks. If you get those 2 things right, that's a starting point, Brandon. And then what happens is that I take people through a lot of the elements that help you get there. How to build the plan, the importance of a coach, the role of accountability, staying in your lane, knowing the things that you're supposed to do. I remember years ago somebody telling me that one of the most important things you can do for your kids is pick one hobby and show a discipline to that.
Right.
So that your garage isn't filled. Well, one year you're skiing, the next year you're golf, and the next year you're fishing, the next year is camping.
Right.
But you have a discipline to it, for example, and so it's staying in that lane and doing the things you do well. So it's been a model and it's been a lot of fun. The success of the book has blown me away. It's still continued to do really well. So
No,
thanks for that question.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've read a good portion of it, and it's powerful, Jim. I think it's got a lot of powerful information. The stories that you intertwine in there are also, they feel timeless, right? You've got a lot of Abraham Lincoln quotes in there. You can never go wrong with Abe.
No.
You got some Mark Twain stuff in there. And then one of the things you talk about, which is funny because I never really heard this outside of like my mom kind of always talking about this, but success traps. Like my mom would always be talking about, the physical, the trappings of success. You want to talk to that a little bit? Because like I said, I've never really heard anybody else kind of talk about it that way.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I guess over the course of time, I was always fascinated, as I said, with success. What is this? And early on, growing up with not a whole lot, it was, how do I get the house, the boat, the car, and, the important things that I thought I didn't have growing up. And those things can always be taken away. So my thought was, the traps is that if it can be taken away or lost, it can't be success. So then what is success? And I just kept trying to figure out a definition that no matter who I threw it up to, if I was talking to a teenage group, if I was talking to parents, fathers, at a corporate setting, if I threw this definition out, people would say, you might be right. I can't really blow a hole in it. So my definition came down to the identification of your personal roles, values, and goals, and then living your personal and professional life in alignment or in accordance with those roles, values, and goals. So if you started with roles, and these are the things that are most important, what goals would I pursue to support my role as a father, for example? What goals would I choose to pursue my role as a husband, as a professional? And then I live like that. It doesn't matter what I accomplish in terms of acquisition, they can never take those things away from me. And that's the whole essence of impact, making a difference in somebody's life that allows them to live with a greater sense of joy and purpose.
I got it. So, I mean, we're really not looking at everything that we, our cars, our house, or our clothes, or, big screen TV as being the, what determines success. We're looking at, what we can hold near and dear to us, the things they can't take away.
Things you can't take away. And I think too, now with elderly parents, I see that because they can't acquire anymore. They're just looking for experiences and relationships. And I've had more people who are at that stage of life, let's say 80 years old plus, that have emphasized that to me time and time again, who have read the book and say, you had that. I wish somebody would have told me that 50 years ago, because I spent so much time, in profession. For example, I was meeting with a guy the other day. He's 67 years old and he's retired. He was trying to get his girls together, who are now 31 and 28, for a dinner for their mom's birthday, right? And it wasn't possible. Their lives were so busy. Oh, Dad, I got an early flight tomorrow morning, and I've got to work late. And they couldn't come up with a date. And he says, now that I have time, they don't.
Yeah, that's
what a gap.
That's powerful, but at the same time, it's kind of like your friend that in his 80s that reads the book and says, I wish I'd had that 50 years earlier, right? I think that we got hindsight, right? We've got hindsight as 2020, because I mean,
Indeed
we all, I feel like we get to this point and we can go and we can tell everybody, and I guess you being a good coach and you kind of being able to navigate these waters a little bit better, are able to kind of get the point across to the importance of trying to make an impact, the importance of living a life of purpose and that type of thing, and trying to intertwine it all. Because I think, I mean, if we go back and we tell this guy's daughters at 28 and 31 and say, hey, listen, you can be doing all that, but you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. If you miss this kind of dinner with your mom, what's it worth?
Yeah. Well, we talked about my mom breaking her hip. She missed the first home game for a Washington State football game in 9 years. But my son was there, and their college roommates and some others. And on my website, I had a picture of it, and I had a lot of comments on it. They all went to the hospital room, right?
That's
my
great.
Mom says, I don't want him in there. I don't really look all that good. I'm thinking, Mom, you're 79. I'm not sure how good you can look anyway. But the picture of everyone gathered around her will be very memorable, to think that she had, basically kids that thought enough of her that they wanted to go and visit, as she calls herself, Grandma Gwen. That was
Right.
a big deal,
That's
fun
cool.
in that hospital room, gathering them all around.
That's a great picture too. I saw that picture. I enjoyed that. The one thing you talk a little bit about is potential and capacity. Let's talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, potential, I don't think we ever tap. There's always, we could go another rung. There's more we could learn. There's more we can learn about fathering. There's more that we can learn in our profession. There's always, another level of potential. capacity really speaks to our discipline and our focus in terms of trying to unlock those things. We always have that capacity within us. We can't do everything, but we can take one more step. So I like to focus people on capacity versus potential a lot of times, because we're never going to tap into our full potential. I saw a study years ago, but UCLA neurologists, et cetera, said that we tap only 2% of our potential. God, think about that. That's mind-boggling. It's only 2%. I feel like I'm a lot higher than that, right? There's that really that much.
They got the wrong case people.
Yeah, they must have picked the wrong people, because I think I'm a lot higher than that. But the capacity that we have to do good, the capacity that we have to pour into our kids, the capacity that we have to fulfill our role as husbands is really just requires us every day to take a positive step in that direction. I always have the capacity to take that step. You and I always have that. And if we focus on that, then it's just taking, whatever positive step I can take today and not worry about the potential. I'm never gonna get there. What's my capacity today to do good?
Right. The one small step, or one small activity. It doesn't really necessarily have to be small, but the one activity you can do today, and taking that step, and realize that your potential is literally, there is no limit.
None.
Especially at the 2% we're maxing out at right now. Right.
Well, I might only be at 1%. I'm not sure, because I thought I was maybe at 50%. So if I divide that in half, I got a 1% deal going.
You're still working on it.
I'm working on it. Yes.
I love it. You've got you also mentioned just the aspect of there's no perfect race, as this book kind of uses the race and breaking through the tape at the finish line as kind of its imagery. You say there's like no perfect race. Let's talk a little bit about kind of not beating yourself up or something like that if the race doesn't go as expected.
Oh man, do any of us have a race that went as expected? I mean, I think that anybody that tells us that I had a perfect plan and it went just as I planned, I don't think that's the case. I mean, even every journey that had a good outcome has circumstances and conditions that change along the way that we don't anticipate, right? Some that are very tragic. We talked about my dad having, personal loss in terms of losing family members. But what happens if, you wake up tomorrow and you've lost a spouse, or, I've had friends who have lost children. You don't plan for that,
Right.
So that's far from perfect. But it's what is our response? We get to choose three things every day. I get to determine what my attitude is. I get to determine what my effort's going to be, and I get to determine what my response is to all these changing circumstances. And so the race won't be perfect, but if I keep moving in that direction every day, I have a chance to get to the finish line and have a positive impact, regardless of the things that happened along the way. And you and I can probably share a bunch of stories about this stuff that it just didn't go the way we wanted, and that's life. It's not going to go the way we plan it. It
Right.
just isn't.
No. Well, well, first of all, Jim, you got to make the plan, right?
Yeah.
You got to make the plan. I know that once upon a time you were looking to be president, and that didn't pan out.
And I had no idea. This was a year I probably could have won last year. I probably should have stuck in this thing. I might have been able to win this thing.
Stuck with it. So you talked a little bit about what do you want to be remembered by, and who do you for. Even you, like right now, what is it? If I asked you, what would you like to be remembered for, and who would you like to be remembered by? How would you answer that question yourself?
Well, first, being a person of faith, I'd like to say that people saw the love of Christ in me every day that I lived. The second thing is I would like them to think that I poured into my wife, Christy, every day. We've been married 35 years. It's not always been perfect, and I've had a lot of fumbles along the way, but, I got better at it and was committed to it to the end. And then I think from a fathering perspective, I would just want my boys, and I've got a few nephews that I a niece that I treat as kids. They lost their father, a number of years ago, is that I was there. I was fully committed to their development and helped them get their footing to be good people.
Right.
I think those would be the top three things. The corporate stuff and those, really not all that important. I always say, Brandon, is that you got a corporate job. We think we're important, right? And we are at the moment. But if you think that you're really important, stick your hand in a bucket of water, then pull it out. And that's about how much you'll be missed. I don't care what level we're at, because they're just going to fill in, right? They're just going to fill in around us. They're going to keep going.
Look, man, I know that I'm just the grease in the axles or whatever, man. Whatever keeps the machine running, I'm there for however they need me, and that's it. It's going to go with or without me. I know that for a fact.
Exactly.
Another thing that you talk quite a bit about that I enjoyed hearing, and it may be in the book, but I definitely heard it in a couple of your podcasts, is just do you talk about the little point about where you were coaching kids right in high school and the encouragement, pouring encouragement into them, and talk a little bit about that, because I felt that was pretty strong.
Oh, thanks. Well, it all came about before the age of a lot of technology. When my boys were really young, when I traveled a lot, I'd write a really simple note for every day of the week that I'd have my wife read to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then any of us that have raised kids, as they start getting to high school and they start getting more friends and more activities, you seem to see them less and less. And I just wanted to give them encouragement and stay connected. So what I started doing, Brandon, is I started texting them messages every morning.
Right.
And they were just, hey, you have a test today. You're ready for this. You'll do well. Elements of inspiration, encouragement. And then I was coaching at the same time, and they started sharing them with their friends. And then the friends started sharing them with their parents. And pretty soon I was texting, to a collection, an address book of, 50, 60 people. And then it got bigger than that. And so now I write inspirational content known as impactful notes. And I write 5 days a week, and it gets delivered. And I'll let your listeners, it's available to everybody. But I write a 80 to 100 word piece of content every day. In fact, just before we got here, it was my writing morning. I was writing content out for the next 6 weeks of those messages.
That's awesome. I love it. I love that. And you also do it. You do it for faith-based as well, too. Is that correct?
I do. I do.
Great.
So that's separate piece that I have, and that's really my own. Somebody asked me who I write to now. In a lot of cases, I'm writing to myself. The own encouragement that I need, that you need. I saw some research and it blew me away, and then I dug a little deeper. It says only 20% of us, 1 in 5 of us every day, get the encouragement necessary for us to be our best on a daily basis. So think about that. Encouragement is, you think it's normal, it's everywhere, and that we all get it. No, we don't. We don't get it.
That's it's pretty powerful. I think I might have overheard that in one of the podcasts of yours I was listening to, because it came out in my podcast today, just talking a little bit about encouragement, and just I recall not having overly much encouragement as a child and growing up, but the times that I was encouraged, those were really just amazingly bright spots. And so even more recently with my current role, I'm encouraged quite a bit where I'm at. And it just makes all the difference in the world. And somebody can say thank you, that's cool. Somebody can not say anything at all, and you're doing a good job. But just a little extra push. It's not even saying thank you. It's not even saying you're doing a good job. It's just encouraging you to keep moving on. And another thing that this book does is encourage you to be who you want to be the person you intend to be, right? Living your own life. Whereas I think you talked a little bit about, a lot of people being on their deathbed and saying, I wish I'd taken these chances to go ahead and be myself. Is that right? Does that sound about right?
Yeah. I think it's really accurate. I think it's hard to discover who we are. One of the quotes, and I think that this probably come back to mind, but Elie Wiesel wrote a book called Souls on Fire. And he says, when we die and we go to heaven and we meet our maker, We're not going to be asked, why did you not discover a cure for such and such? Why didn't you become a Messiah? The only thing you're going to be asked at that precious moment is, why didn't you become you? And,
That's
we are
powerful, though.
all
It's
really
powerful.
unique creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, why didn't you become you? And you have kids now that, they think they need to be like their buddy or their best friend, or, there's only one path that they should take in terms of discovering what their interests are. I don't know what that is, but they should explore and figure out what that is that allows them to create the most impact for the people that are going to cross their paths over the course of their lives.
That's great. And that kind of changed for you. Didn't you? You got fired from a job, right? Or you got let go from the job?
Basically, yeah,
I'm not going to
yeah.
use harsh terms, but so you got let go, and I think it sounded like you were a little, not bitter, but a little upset about it. But then, like, you had a friend of yours, come up and say, God fired you and put you in here for a reason and set you on this path. Can you talk a little? I think it's really interesting for me to talk to somebody who's almost a career corporate person. Like at age of 29, you were the VP of was it banking?
It was sales distribution. Yeah,
So you're VP at age 29, and you're an ambitious man, and you're climbing the rungs, and you're doing everything quote unquote societally correct, right? And everything for lack of better terminology, this is you're doing all these things, and then it kind of gets taken away from you, and now you're like, it seems to me you're living a little bit more to the tune of your heart.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's a tremendous observation. And it took me a long while to probably wrestle with it, but the nuts and bolts of it is I was a couple rungs away from the chairmanship of International Paper, and at one point I wanted to be president, chairman, all those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through a series of leadership changes. And the new president of the division that I was in decided they were going to make some changes. And as they made those changes, I had opportunities that would require me to move. And I said, this just isn't going to be the path. In fact, what was strange about that is I had journaled about the fact that I was not going to be here.
Right.
Probably a year before that event.
Okay.
So it wasn't a shock that it occurred, but yeah, I was upset about that. I mean, I poured 25 years into this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you wake up and guess what? You're not that person anymore. And I did have a friend come to me and said, did you ever think that God fired you? The sovereign creator of the universe decided that wasn't what you're going to do anymore.
Right.
And that was why don't you whack me on the side of the head? What do you mean? He didn't do that. He was leading me on this path. Well, no. And it took me a while. It took me a while to get my feet on the ground and readjust to a much smaller world. I had 1,200 employees, Brandon. I had 21 locations. I had $1 billion worth of sales I was responsible for. And now I was responsible for a household with no kids in it, my wife, and she really didn't want me around that much. Let's face it, right? So world changed. So I think to your question, yeah, I refocused myself. I didn't lose my skills. I didn't lose my passion. They needed to be redirected. Right. And that's really what the essence of Tape Breakers and Impactful Notes, that's what I do. I do the same thing. Just how do I pour into people to help them discover, the uniqueness that's within them.
I love it. I want to flip it over to just a little bit, start to intertwine it here, because there was another comment that you'd made about how fathers or men in general identify with their careers, and kind of what the impact of that is on the family.
Yeah, it's funny. The best way to describe that, I remember my youngest son was probably 8 or 9. He had a bunch of buddies over, and I'm listening in their conversation. We all do that, right? And they're all asking, well, what's your dad do? And one dad, I don't remember what they're doing, but they're going, I'm a fireman, he's a school teacher, he's whatever. And they say, Andrew, what's your dad do? And he pauses, right? He goes, he talks. So,
Right.
He didn't really think that, I'm a senior executive and he thinks that I talk. Well, obviously I do. But it was one of those eye-opening things. But if we go to a cocktail party, right, or we're going to a picnic, people ask you what you do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what's the first thing you say? You don't say, well, I'm a husband or a father. You say, I'm a salesperson, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a dentist, I'm a,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it is our identity when we step outside of our home.
Right. Do you agree that it should be that way, or do you think that we should make a shift on that at all?
I think that that's when I ask, if you go through the question, I say, who do you want to be remembered by?
Mm-hmm.
The corporate experience never hits the top when
Yeah.
people really get at it. I was just working with a CEO recently, and he had his career number one, and he was a president of a professional association that was second. And then he went down below that, and his wife was third or fourth.
Right.
And so then we asked him, I said, what do you want it to be? And it was like this eye-opening experience. He goes, I'm not even close.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, in fact, just to conclude that, what was powerful, I remember asking him, I said, have you shared your new list with your wife? He goes, no. I said, well, don't you think you should? And he
Right.
said, yeah. So the next week I'm talking to him, and he said, Jim, you're not going to believe this. I showed my wife that list and she started crying.
Oh, yeah.
I said, was that tears of joy or was that,
I've enjoyed you focusing on your career, and then, and I think that we can get ourselves wrapped up in it, right? Because speaking as as a father and a man of the family, we think of ourselves as needing to accomplish all these things for our family,
Yeah,
and then somehow it gets twisted into that's who you are and you become, and you start focusing on all those things that you're trying to do for your family, but you're not doing anything with your family. You know,
right.
uh, and one of the other things that you had in the book, I'm sorry to jump around. It's just
This is good. It's good.
the one of the other ones you had in there was "Fake It Till You Make It," and you referenced the Cuddy TED Talk. Is that right? Did I say her name right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
funny that you mentioned that, though. Is that I think in most of the podcasts that I do, you can only see me like shoulder down. I'm standing here with like my hands on my hips because of that TED Talk. Or I'll stand there for for 2 minutes a day. But why don't you tell us a little bit about "Fake It Till You Make It" and Cuddy, and just kind of why we're even talking about it.
Well, the essence of that is I saw that TED Talk and I just loved it. Right. So, we get big, and a power pose that she describes, we know neurologically it just flushes all the stress chemicals in the body and makes us more powerful, more confident, more courageous.
Right.
And the beauty of that story was, if you remember, is that I was in a training program, my first job out of school, and Charlie Pike is the speaker after lunch. And Charlie rolls down, the steps and gets on the stage. And he gets to the end. He's only up there a couple minutes. He says, listen, sales is tough. You need to get in front of the mirror every morning and you tell yourself you feel great with passion and enthusiasm until you believe it. And I'm thinking he knew about power posing long before Amy Cuddy did the research. Charlie was a pioneer, 30
Right.
years ago. And I never forgot that. Tell yourself you feel great. And there's a change in physiology, change in our mindset, because I don't know about you, but I don't roll out of bed every day feeling, like a world beater. Do you? I don't.
Not every day, Jim. Not every day. Some days, some
Some
days,
days.
some days. You bet I do. Some days, some days there's an
Right.
extra spring in my step, and I'm like, let's world beater, definitely. Um, it's funny because my child, my youngest one, has kind of that. I feel great some days, man, and it's not like but more often than not, actually, I feel pretty good, Jim.
That's
I
good.
feel
That's
pretty
good.
good. I feel pretty good, and it's fun to see. It's fun to see that kind of enthusiasm from your children as well, as they're
Oh,
growing
yeah.
up, and their the confidence in themselves, whether or not it's granted or not. They have it no matter what, right? It's like, why are you
Yeah.
why are you so happy? Why are you so stoked up? What, I don't know. I just am. And that's it. And so I love that story though too, because I can just imagine a guy walking down there and everybody's sitting there looking at each other. What the hell's this guy? Where's he
Yeah.
coming from?
Yeah, we've just had lunch. We're thinking about what's, the post lunch nap we're going to take, another
Right.
presenter, and he's down. Yeah, I've never forgot him. Those things are memorable. He's only on the stage for 5 minutes, but I still remember his name,
Charlie Pike.
Charlie Pike.
He's a legend. Have you talked to him? Have you ever heard from him after that?
No,
Was he just
no.
some guy that kind of came through, or was he somebody that worked
He
for the
was,
company?
he was with Owens Corning Fiberglass when I joined him. He was a sales manager someplace, and just one of those people that got it. How do you put your best foot forward? Fake it till you make it. Tell yourself, and it will change you.
Right.
When you look at yourself, and if you're not feeling tip top, that change does occur. In fact, I do that. I have that exercise. I work with a number of collegiate golfers.
Right.
And that power pose, when they get under stress, I said, just stick your club above your head as you're walking down the fairway and hold it up. And they'll come back to me and say, man, you know something, Jim? That really works.
That's
I said,
great.
yeah, science is amazing, huh? Perfect.
That's great. That's great. And then I'm going to finish out the book on this question. Just what would be like a tool or two that you would recommend that to finish strong, right? If somebody's got to finish strong, finish that race strong, what do you say?
First and foremost, who in your life is close to you and holds you accountable? Who do you share the important things that you want to accomplish and the struggles you have and keeps you online? That we are not created to run these races alone. And men, we are really dangerous when we're running alone. So who do you bring close to you that, you ask the tough questions of, they ask the tough questions of you, and truly hold you accountable to perform in terms of the important relationships in your life? If you do nothing else, that's number one. And the second one would be, who's your coach?
Right.
I find over and over again, more so that I now can follow my own advice. Self-reliance is not a good personal strategy. So if you want to do something important, who are you? Who's your coach? Just like why you do this podcast, you're trying to pour into great fathers who want to be great fathers. This is a coaching environment.
Right.
What can I glean from this? What can I apply? I'm not going to run this race on my own. I'm going to join with other fathers who are like-minded that want to do a great job in that role. So those would be the two things I'd zero in on.
Absolutely. Now, how did you have you always had coaches and mentors, and when did you recognize that the impact that was having in your life?
My first job out of college, again, Owens Corning Fiberglass, and I write about it in the chapter on encouragement, was Butch Ferguson. And that was the first time that I truly understood what a coach and a mentor, and they're a little bit different, but a coach and a mentor was. And he was unbelievable, shaping my life. Remember, I said my parents were relatively poor. Their idea of what corporate America was, they had no idea, right?
Right.
So I remember the first Christmas getting out of college, and my parents had bought me a clip-on tie and a few other things, and they were really proud that they bought me these things.
Right.
And then, but you and I both know that was not what I needed, right? And I remember showing up, and I'd bought some of the right stuff, and I remember Butch Ferguson taking me down to Brooks Brothers and say, "This is the way you dress,"
right.
and laid it out and treated me both almost like a father, a coach, a mentor. He truly cared. And I said, man, this is what you need in life. These are the types of people you'd run through walls for.
Right.
And I've stayed in touch with Butch his entire life. I mean, he was memorable. I'll never forget what he did and how he poured into my life. So I knew it then at, the age of 21, 22.
Wow.
And now over the course of my career, I mentioned a couple of them in the book. My friend Larry, still in touch with Larry.
Let's not let go of Larry. I'm using Larry to transition us into the next one.
But yeah, I value that more than ever, because I'm a pretty self-reliant guy. I don't know about you, but
sure.
I know a lot of us. I want to do it on my own, and then I figured out doing it on your own is pretty stupid. There's a lot of people that'll help you.
It takes I don't know if you're a Zig Ziglar fan or not, but
love Zig.
there's the one line that he uses. I use it on my kids. You can get there fast. Sometimes you can get there faster by yourself, but you can go further with a group.
Absolutely.
So I love that
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Speaking of your buddy Larry, there was one line that he gave to you that kind of told you where to put your focus.
Mm-hmm.
What was that line?
Yep. If you put your family first, you'll never be disappointed.
What does that mean to you when you kind of mull it over?
Well, I think we all face really important decisions, decisions of career, maybe decisions of finances, etc. But the real filter, the most important filter, is where do you place your family in that decision? Are they taking a back seat, or are you looking at them as the most important people who are going to be there? When you're 60, 70, 80 years old, they're the ones that are going to be around you.
Right.
So do you put them first, and are you treating them in a way that they feel like they're that important? And the story I tell in the book, Brennan, as you know, was that I was facing a significant move, a significant opportunity for advancement. But very near to that decision, my wife had a family member who passed away who lived close to us with 3 kids under the age of 12. So it was one of those, that was probably the demarcation point of where I said my career was important, but it wasn't going to define me. These people are much more important to me. And it's bared out over the last 13, 14 years. I wouldn't go back and change that decision. I'm grateful for Larry, because if I had been left to my own devices, I probably would have chose a career. But he just kept saying, if you put your family first, you'll never be disappointed.
That's great. And how and you felt like that phrase kind of echoing and carrying you forth since then?
Oh, absolutely. And if I find myself too, and that's why I share it in the book as well, is that, who do you want to be remembered by? If you're not using that as a filter, you'll make a bunch of decisions and then wonder why particular relationships, why don't you have a great relationship with your kids? Why isn't your relationship with your wife more solid and impactful than it is today? And I think that filter has been invaluable.
It's a great filter. It really is. Let's talk a little bit about your family upbringing. I know we talked about your dad a little bit. Can you just talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the things that he did as your dad, father, and that you're holding on to and carrying forward with you?
I think the 2 words that come out for me is commitment and discipline. And there was a time I wanted to buy a bike one time when I was a kid, and those circulars now that you get in the mail used to be delivered door to door. And I got a circular route that was going to pay me a half a cent for every one of those I delivered. Right. So you can imagine going door to door in Spokane, Washington, 200 doors in the middle of winter was not a lot of fun.
Right.
So after a couple of weeks of doing that, I announced to my dad I was quitting. And he said, well, does your boss have a replacement? I said, why should that matter? I don't want to do this anymore. He says, you can't quit till he has somebody to replace you. And so I had to do it a few more weeks. But it was one of those, if you say you're going to do something, right, do it. Right. And even when it doesn't feel good, if you made the commitment, do it.
Right.
So I think it was a commitment and discipline. And I saw him do that, a couple times, taking a second job. We didn't have much, but he got 3 kids through college. We were the first college graduates in the family. Right. And it's just kind of crazy how he was able to do that. He just was very disciplined and committed. If you said you're going to do something, do it.
Right. That's an important one to take forward. And just for yourself, what does fatherhood mean to you? Like, if you think about fatherhood, what does that entail?
Love, number one. Not only a sense of loving them, but the love you get back. I think that my experience now with my boys, 25, 28, my nieces and nephews, between the ages of, now 19 and 24, is that if I wouldn't have poured into them, I'm not sure they'd even want to spend time with me. Right. But because I did that, And I didn't do that out of obligation, so to speak, because you truly love them. Is that it's coming back to me in ways that I can't even begin to describe. The relationships that I have with them and the time they want to spend with me now, even going out of their way to spend time with me. I was in Seattle last week and I called my nephew and said, "Hey, I'm only going to be there for a day." He goes, "Let's have dinner."
Nice.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate having somebody pick up the tab now.
The tides have turned.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is this. So what do your kids say you do now? We talked earlier where they said where you said you overheard them and all you do is talk. What do they say you do now? If somebody asks them.
Well, my youngest, who still thinks he's really funny, would probably say, "Yeah, he's still talking, never shut up." But I'm pretty sure that they would say author, speaker, coach. I think
cool.
that they recognize the stuff that I'm doing. They understand the idea of impact and my personal heart for people and helping people do well in the things that are important to them.
Right on. Would you say that during your corporate career that was also a part of your success?
It was late in my career.
Okay.
I mean, I think that was a learned thing. Having great mentors like Butch and Larry and a few others, I learned it. I was really selfish. I mean, I was in a hurry. I didn't know where I was going, but I was in a hurry. I wanted the brass ring. I wanted the office. I wanted the title. I wanted it all. And I think I learned that. You can't get people to work hard for you unless you care about them.
Right.
And I cared, but I cared as long as they were doing well.
Right.
And I think that transitioned probably in the second half of my career. I started to see, quarterly reports are important. Quarterly earnings are important. Corporate is always going to push you for those things, but you got to care about people. Right. I learned that. I didn't have that at first. Not at all. It was all about me.
I hear you, brother. I understand. I think that one of the other things you talked about, if I didn't jot it down, was the you come to learn servitude. Well, there it is. You touch and recognize. So what is that? The you touch and recognize on the positive contributions and you serve others, and sooner or later you get there. I jotted it down out of one of your quotes. So you feel like regardless of kind of where you're at now, most people are going to end up being not heartless.
Well, I think we're broken to begin with. So, I think that we have a moral DNA that we're born with, and the world tugs us away from that. And we begin to think things are more important than people. And I think that for me, from a faith perspective, the more I dig in and try to reflect on what's really important and where I get my identity, you then say, guess what? It's not what I get, it's what I give. Right. I think there's three perspectives people have on things. What is yours is mine, I want it. What is mine, I'll keep it. What is mine is God's, and give me the courage to have the heart and the eyes to use it to His glory. And I think that's, I think there's I think we somewhat progress in that if we keep pursuing, the living Christ, the living Lord. I think if you do that, you discover it. Okay.
No, that's also very powerful. Also very powerful. And another thing you talked about was surrounding yourself with encouragers as being key. And while you recognize that yourself, how are you making sure that your children recognize that as well?
Well, the one, with the impactful notes, they get something from me every day, as do others. So that's one of those elements of the reminder. We need reminders. There's a Harvard study that says 53% of the time our minds wander, even when we're focused on something that's important. So mind wanders. Second thing is that negative is like Velcro. It sticks to us. It's just the way the brain works. It takes 12 seconds for something incredibly positive, a positive experience, to be moved from our short-term to our long-term memory. That's why we're able to recall things that happened bad so quickly. So this essence of encouragement with the kids is that just pouring into them every day as an example, I believe, is the best thing. People learn from our example more than what we say. So by setting that example every day, I see them doing the same thing. Give you a perfect example of it. So my mom's got this broken hip. My sister lives up in the areas providing care. So we're there last weekend. My 25-year-old son, who sometimes I don't think has really got that heart, has got his arm around his aunt's shoulder and says, Aunt Debbie, if you need us to come over early next weekend when we come back, I'll take a day off work so I can help.
Oh, that's
I'm going,
nice.
oh my gosh.
Something stuck.
Oh my gosh. It's stuck, right? It's
Yeah,
stuck. And I'm just
right.
going, I called my wife. I said, Christy, you're not going to believe what Andrew just said. She goes, I knew it was in there. I knew it was in there. So
Right. Nice. Another thing that you'd mentioned about that I really enjoy a lot is being present as a father. You want to speak to that a little bit?
yeah, presence. We get so distracted today, cell phones, smartphones, TV, everything else, is that the idea of presence is an undistracted interaction with somebody, just like you and I are having. There's nothing else that's in our world right now. You and I are having a great conversation. And I think that's the presence with our kids as well, teaching them, to take all the distractions away. Yeah, we may be sitting down and watching a ball game or, having a meal, but that time that I'm just focused on you and you're the most important person in this moment, and there's nothing else that is going to grab my attention. I think kids eat that up. I know they eat it up. They've got so many other things that are going on, but when we look them right in the eye and we've got them covered and they can see that they have our undivided attention, that presence is powerful. In fact, there's a ton of research right now saying that the absence of presence in leadership, whether it be in the home or in the office, is the destruction of culture. Because everybody, they say that we'll pick up a smartphone in the workplace every 90 seconds. So a worker, that's what they do. They're going to pick it up every 90 seconds. You think, wow, so it's a shift. So I think presence is huge.
I love it. The speaking about presence, you also developed a really nice way to spend some time with your children, and I think that's worth sharing too. I believe you call it your Friday night, you guys' night.
Guys' night out.
Yeah.
Guys' night out. I was traveling a ton, and if your kids are young and you've been gone 3 or 4 days and they've connected to mom and a few other things, so you connecting with them when you come back is not automatic. You've been gone. So what we did was Friday night, my boys knew it. We were going out. For us in California, it was In-N-Out Burger, and then there was a arcade that we go to, most of the time. But it was just time together. So they knew when I came home, I wasn't doing anything. When I came in the door, I was theirs. And generally they were ready to go. They were, whatever we were going to do, but off in the car. And it gave my wife a night off too.
Sure.
Because she'd been taking care of them, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
The spillover of that, Brandon, today is, for example, my boys went to Washington State. My wife went to Washington State. I went to Washington State. We'll travel to 5 home games together and have for the last 3 years since they're out. My oldest son's a lawyer, but we travel together. So I believe, my heart of hearts, if I wouldn't have had Friday nights out, Friday guys' night out, and spent that time with them and established that,
right,
today our relationship would be different. And I will tell you that spilled over into Saturdays too. We'd grab lunch on Saturday or something, but it was my connectivity back to them, and huge impact.
Making sure you're spending that time. And I think that you'd mentioned not necessarily even just quality time, just time.
I think you hit it. It's time.
Right.
If we line ourselves up around quality time, then we're making it an event. And life's a journey. It's not an event. It's a whole process.
I hear you. And I would definitely say that I wouldn't call myself guilty of that, but I would say, we want so much to make these memories that it's like, I think I've been called out on it too by my wife. She's like you're making it more than this. I'm just like, I just want to make memories, because we understand how much they mean to us. that we kind of turn them into events where they should just kind of be these moments instead of these grand events. All we really want to do it. Just want my kids to know that I love them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess taking the quality time thing out of it and just saying, hey, look, let's just go spend some time and go do something and not make it like as much. I like that. Gonna ask you for like any parting fatherhood tips. Is there anything that like anything you found through fatherhood outside of the Friday night ritual? I think is really nice. Anything else that you would throw out there for fathers that you found along the way?
Love their mother. Pour into their mother. Because kids are so attached to their moms. I mean, I'm sure there's listeners out there that have less than the traditional, family, and maybe there's been a divorce, there's been a number of things, but I find even in that case, love their mother. Your respect and care for the mother of the children is huge. They see that.
Right.
And when they see that you pour into their mom, I think it just opens up a part of them that can't be accessed any other way. So I think that's the one. And then the other thing that we were just talking about, Brendan, is that time. Make every effort to spend as much time as possible. And with that, you're going to have kids that don't have your interests. I remember my oldest son, I was a sports guy, right? I remember my oldest son at one point telling me, Dad, I'm just not a sports guy.
All right.
And he was into animals and the zoo, and I hate the zoo. I don't know about you. Zoos stink, right?
Literally, quite literally.
Literally. I'm not a zoo guy, but I've been to a lot of zoos when he was young. So I just took so the other thing is take an interest in the things that they have an interest in and help them develop that. And they may come around to like some of the stuff you do, and they might not. For example, my youngest son, 25, he just bought a boat. I hate boats, but he's got a boat, so God love him.
Right.
I'm now a boater, I guess.
That's truth. So I mean, what you're saying is just regardless. I mean, they're their own people. They have their own identities, and encourage them to be themselves. Yeah.
They find a lot of identity in that, and they'll be bold. They'll take more chances and more risks when you support the things that they think that they have an interest in.
I like it.
I've seen that.
Perfect. Most often gifted book outside of yours?
Most often gifted book. Boy, there's a bunch of them. For men, a lot of the people that work for me, it was God Built by Steve Farrar. In the business world, Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith. And faith-based, Crazy Love by Francis Chan would probably be three that in the last few years given away.
Got it. Very cool. Very cool. Triggers, I've heard that one a couple times now. I'll have to check it out myself. We anything that you think that we didn't kind of cover on this conversation in fatherhood and the book?
No, I think you've done a great job. I've loved the conversation. I would say just kind of on the closing is that this idea of encouragement, we think that we deliver a lot more encouragement than we really do. And if you kind of took a test of yourself on a daily basis, I did my best to encourage my kids and graded yourself every day,
right,
on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, I think is incredibly powerful, because I found myself time and time again that I get caught up in my own world, and I probably wasn't as encouraging. So it was just that simple question. I did my very best today to encourage, Matthew, encourage Andrew. Gives you a different perspective.
Question on that one then for me is like, while I feel like I'm encouraging how and doing it to the best of my current ability, what would you recommend for somebody how to improve encouragement, their ability to encourage, I guess?
One, I would say, especially if your kids are a little bit older, you can give them opportunity to get impactful notes. Use some of those tools and resources that allow you to broaden your thinking.
Okay.
Third parties third party information to our kids is really powerful, because dads, we're not that smart. We get smarter after they get older, but using third parties. So I'll give you another example. I've got a collegiate golfer that I work with, and his dad was one that was always really engaged with him.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad recently said, I've found out that my role now is just to encourage. You're the performance coach. He's got a swing coach. All I have to do is love and support him now.
Okay.
And it's changed their relationship, because now he just looks at his dad, patting him on the back, telling him he can do it, give it his best shot, versus, oh, you're doing this, or you're doing that.
Right.
He's not the technical resource. So anytime a father can bring third party in, helps, so you can just love them,
Right.
pat him on the back, help him to struggle. Because I think that's the other thing, Brad. We as parents, I don't know about you, but I didn't want my kids to struggle, right? I just want them to be successful.
Right. Absolutely.
So learning how to let them struggle is the only way to let them grow. And I don't know about you, that was really tough for me. I just want them to win at everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let them struggle. Let them
Yeah.
struggle.
No, that's also very powerful. I love it. Thanks for sharing those. Those are all very good. Definitely useful. Impactful notes. We talked a little bit about how can they get it.
Real easy. Text iNotes, INOTES, to 33444.
Cool. Definitely awesome that you offer that. And that's a note. You don't charge for that?
Nope.
You said it's a okay. All right.
Yeah. Pour into you 5 days a week. They're brief. They're 80 to 100 words, and they're well researched, and it's all the stuff that you could spend hours and weeks researching, and I've already done it for you. I'm just going to give you great tidbits 5 days a week.
Thanks for taking that time for us, Jim. There was another thing that's dear to your heart, and I just wanted to make sure that the audience is aware of it, the teen trafficking.
Oh, yeah. My wife and I, it's probably 4 years ago when I got fired and, life changed,
Mm-hmm.
is I had an eye-opening experience that I didn't really realize. I got tugged to a meeting, and there was a gal there that came out of the life. If a young woman is in the world of prostitution, they call it being in the life. And I became aware that today in the U.S., every single day, between 100,000 and 300,000 girls between the ages of 12 and 19 will be trafficked for sex today in the U.S. You and I could go and find a hotel near our home, and I will guarantee you that services are being offered. And so these women and these young girls their lives are being torn from them. And it's rising, Brandon, because drugs and guns, which are number one and number two for crime, especially with gangs, are falling because there's a product that can be traced and everything else. They can't trace largely the trafficking of a young girl. And a young girl to a gang, a pimp, is worth upwards of $250,000 a year. And they're just a product.
Right.
I mean, dehumanizing is as great as anything that we can possibly imagine. So we work with a couple organizations in providing care and transition for women that come out of the life, and also trying to take steps to prevent those that are drawn into it.
What are some resources, or what do you, the awareness is one thing. What can people do to get involved? Anything along those lines, not necessarily, get involved. What can be done from anyone who's listening today?
Well, one, I think because we're talking largely to fathers, one of the greatest entrees to that, and the demand is created, is pornography online. And if any of us have a problem with it, we need to ask for help, because it leads, we're going to act out on those things. This research is definitive on this. And be aware of it, and be aware of it with our teenage boys that are growing up,
Right.
because they end up with an unhealthy view of what a sexual relationship is like.
Right.
And as a result, it makes and gives a gateway to these things being available and requested on a daily basis. So that's one thing that each of us can do. And then the others, excuse me, I would look to local churches. Put in number of local churches will be involved in this, but also if you just put human trafficking, Google it and look for resources. There's a number of them that are germane to your local area. I'm sure we work with the Orangewood Foundation here. Interestingly enough, last year, In-N-Out Burger, which is kind of a iconic brand, started working on that subject last year as well. So we worked with them as well.
That's great. That's great. And I want to say thanks, to your work that you're doing there and just making people aware of it. Right. I think you'd mentioned in another one, it's not getting the publicity, and not that we want to make it publicity, a big public thing, but we need to be paying attention to it. And
we do.
And especially as fathers, none of us would want to ever, I don't have any daughters, but I'd never want to see my daughter in that situation. And, from my son's aspects, from their eyes, I would never want to see them involved in that behavior or that type of thing. And I think that it's a lot easier to curb that type of activity if we're aware of it and we make others aware of it.
Yeah, awareness is a big deal, and not to look the other way. You can't believe, even, if you take Google and some of these, they're complicit in supporting this process. So we can say that certain things may not or should not appear on the internet, but why is trafficking of young girls for sex acceptable being trafficked online? I mean, anybody that would say that was all right, just huge question mark in my mind.
No, fair enough. Jim, again, I want to say thanks for stopping in and having this conversation. I want to say thanks again for your work on Tape Breakers. Great book, really enjoy it. I recommend it to anybody to go pick this up. I think they're going to be motivated, and really it speaks to my heart. So I think that it'll speak to many others that are listening. Where can we go find you if we're going to look for you online, Jim?
Great. It's Jim, D as in Douglas, Akers, AKERS.com. And if they go there, they can also sign up for Impactful Notes, and they can also get the first chapter of the book for free. There's a panel on the right-hand column of my website that allows you to click sign up, and I'll send you that first chapter that involves that story about my dad, which, if you read nothing else, is worth reading, I believe.
It really is. It's powerful. It's very powerful. And you've got a great blog that you write up there too. So
thanks.
You're doing a lot of good in the world, Jim. Thanks for coming on Fatherhood for the Rest of Us today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you, Brandon. Thanks for inviting me.